Welcome, dear traveler, to this quiet corner of the world where snowflakes dance like whispered secrets and the warmth of a crackling fire awaits you. Before we begin tonight's journey, I wonder, where are you resting as you listen to these words? Perhaps you're nestled beneath soft blankets or curled in your favorite chair. Wherever you are, know that you are welcome here. Now, let yourself settle deeper into comfort. Feel the weight of the day lifting from your shoulders like morning mist rising from a frozen lake. Take a slow, gentle breath, drawing in peace, releasing all that no longer serves you. Allow my voice to guide you softly into rest, to a place where the gentle snow falls endlessly, and a small cottage waits with its hearth glowing warm against the winter night. In the heart of an ancient forest, where towering pines stood like silent guardians draped in mantles of pristine snow, there existed a cottage so small and unassuming that one might walk past it a dozen times without ever knowing it was there. The forest itself was a cathedral of winter, its branches heavy with snow that sparkled like crushed diamonds in the pale moonlight. Each tree wore its frozen burden with dignified grace, bowing slightly under the weight, creating archways and tunnels through which the wind whispered its eternal song. The cottage, built long ago by hands whose names had been forgotten by time, sat nestled in a clearing no larger than a village square. Its walls were constructed of rough-hewn timber, weathered to a silvery gray by countless seasons, each plank fitted so precisely that not even the most determined draft could find purchase. The roof, steep and angular to shed the heavy snows, was thatched with reeds that had been gathered from a distant marsh in a summer that felt like a dream. Now, that roof bore a blanket of snow so thick and pure that it seemed the cottage wore a crown of winter itself. From the single chimney, a thin tendril of smoke rose steadily, curling and twisting as it climbed toward the star-scattered sky. The smoke was the color of twilight, gray and gossamer, and it carried with it the sweet scent of burning pine and applewood, a fragrance that spoke of warmth and safety and home. The windows, small and diamond-paned, glowed with a golden light that seemed almost alive, pulsing gently like a heartbeat, casting rectangular pools of warmth onto the pristine snow beyond. Outside, the snow continued its eternal descent, each flake unique in its crystalline perfection, falling with the patient inevitability of time itself. Some landed on the cottage's roof, adding to the layers already accumulated there. Others settled on the branches of the surrounding pines, causing them to dip and sway with graceful resignation. Still others found their way to the ground, joining the countless generations of snowflakes that had come before, building the silence deeper, making the world softer, gentler, more forgiving. The clearing around the cottage was transformed by winter into something otherworldly, a place where reality and dream intertwined like the branches of ancient trees. What had been a garden in warmer months was now a landscape of undulating white, punctuated here and there by the dark silhouettes of sleeping perennials, their stems bent low in supplication to the season. A stone well stood near the cottage door, its wooden bucket hanging from a rope so encrusted with frost that it sparkled like a rope of pearls in the dim light. A narrow path, no wider than a man's shoulders, led from the cottage door through the clearing and disappeared into the forest beyond. This path was kept clear by daily passage, though even now, as the snow fell steadily, it was beginning to fill once more. The forest determined to reclaim every inch of open ground. On either side of the path, the snow lay deep and undisturbed, its surface smooth as milk, unmarred by any footprint save those of the small creatures who made their home in this wilderness. The rabbits and foxes and winter birds who knew the forest's secrets. Inside the cottage, the world was entirely different, a realm unto itself where winter could not reach. The single room that comprised the entire dwelling was a masterpiece of humble comfort, every element arranged with the kind of care that comes from years of living in harmony with one's surroundings. The walls, though rough on the exterior, were smooth within, their timber aged to a rich honey color that seemed to absorb and reflect the firelight in equal measure. The hearth dominated the far wall, a magnificent structure of river stones fitted together with such skill that no mortar had been needed to hold them in place. Each stone had been chosen for its shape and size, its color and texture, creating a mosaic of grays and browns and subtle blues that told the story of the river from which they had come. The hearth itself was deep and wide, large enough to burn logs the length of a man's arm, and within its embrace, a fire burned with steady, comforting purpose. Flames danced and leaped, their movements hypnotic in their endless variety. Now they reached upward like golden fingers trying to grasp something just beyond reach. Now they curled and twisted like dancers in some ancient ritual. The fire's light painted everything in shades of amber and gold, creating shadows that swayed and shifted with each flicker, making the cottage seem alive, breathing, welcoming. The logs in the fire were a carefully chosen mixture: pine for its sweet scent and cheerful crackle, applewood for its steady heat and subtle fragrance, and oak for its long, burning reliability. They had been cut and split in autumn, stacked with care to dry through the fall, and now they fulfilled their purpose with noble sacrifice, transforming themselves into warmth and light and comfort. As they burned, they released not just heat but memories, whispers of the sun that had nourished them, the rain that had sustained them, the winds that had shaped them. The fire's crackle was not a single sound but a symphony of small noises, each distinct yet blending into a chorus of comfort. There was the sharp snap of a pocket of sap exploding in the heat, the gentle hiss of moisture evaporating from the wood, the soft rustle of ash settling in the hearth's bed, the occasional pop and spark that sent tiny embers dancing upward like fireflies. Together, these sounds created a rhythm as old as humanity itself, the primal music of fire tended and fire taming the darkness. Beside the chair, a small table held the necessities of a winter evening. A teacup, delicate despite its obvious age, sat upon a saucer, both crafted from porcelain so fine that the firelight shone through them, revealing the brown liquid within. The tea had been brewed from herbs gathered in summer, dried and stored in labeled jars that lined a shelf across the room. Tonight's blend was chamomile and mint, with a touch of dried apple for sweetness, a combination that soothed both body and spirit. Next to the teacup lay a book, its leather binding cracked with age, its pages yellowed but still legible, filled with words that had been read so many times that certain passages were committed to memory. The book's edges were worn soft, its corners rounded by handling, and here and there, pressed between its pages, were small treasures, A dried flower, a fallen leaf, a blade of grass from a summer meadow, each marking a moment too precious to forget entirely. The cottage's keeper, an old soul whose years were written in the lines of a weathered face and the silver of hair that fell past stooped shoulders, sat in the chair before the fire, wrapped in a quilt that had been pieced together from scraps of fabric accumulated over a lifetime. Each square of the quilt told a story, this one from a dress worn to a long-ago celebration, that one from a shirt that had clothed a beloved friend, another from curtains that had once hung in a different home, a different life. The keeper's eyes, though dimmed by years, still held a spark of something vital, a curiosity that age could not extinguish, a wonder that remained despite all the seasons witnessed. Those eyes watched the fire now, following the dance of flames with the contentment of one who has seen this dance 10,000 times and still finds beauty in it. Occasionally they would close, the lids growing heavy, the pull of sleep growing stronger, only to flutter open again, reluctant to miss even a moment of this perfect evening. The snow outside continued its silent accumulation, the world beyond the cottage windows growing whiter, deeper, more mysterious with each passing hour. The wind, which had been gentle earlier, began to strengthen slightly, not enough to be called a storm, but sufficient to make the pine branches sway and send small cascades of snow falling from their boughs. This wind found the cottage and moved around it, not as an adversary, but as an old acquaintance, testing the walls and roof, finding them sound, moving on to other destinations. Inside, the fire responded to the wind's presence by burning more vigorously, as if determined to prove its strength against the winter's chill. The keeper noticed this change and smiled, a small expression that deepened the lines around eyes and mouth, adding another layer to a face that was itself a map of years lived fully. With slow, deliberate movements, the keeper reached for another log from the basket beside the chair, a piece of pine still bearing bark on one side, and placed it carefully on the fire. The new log settled into place with a soft thump, sending a small shower of sparks upward. The sparks rose like tiny stars, golden and brief, their lives measured in seconds before they faded into darkness. The fire embraced the new log, flames licking along its surface, finding the resin within, burning more brightly for a moment before settling back into its steady, comforting rhythm. On the mantel above the hearth, a collection of small objects bore witness to a life lived in this place. There was a clock, its face yellowed with age, its hands moving with the patient ticking that measured time, not in minutes, but in moments. Beside it stood a candlestick, brass worn dull by decades of polishing, and a small wooden box whose contents were known only to the keeper. A few stones, unusual in their shapes or colors, sat alongside these items, each one collected from somewhere in the forest, each one holding a memory of the day it was found. The walls of the cottage held their own stories. Shelves lined one wall, filled with jars of preserved foods, the fruits of autumn's harvest put up for winter's lean months. There were jams and preserves, their colors jewel-bright in the firelight, pickled vegetables, dried beans and grains, honey in jars that glowed like captured sunshine. Hanging from hooks beneath the shelves were braids of garlic and onions, bundles of dried herbs that scented the air with summer's memory. Another wall held tools, each one hung in its proper place, handles worn smooth by use, blades and edges kept sharp and ready. There was an axe for splitting wood, a saw for cutting it, a hammer, and various other implements whose purposes were as familiar to the keeper as breathing. These tools were not merely objects, but partners in the daily work of survival, each one essential, each one respected. A small loft, accessible by a ladder, occupied the space beneath the steep roof. There, beneath layers of quilts and blankets, was the keeper's bed, a simple pallet of straw and wool that had cradled sleep through countless nights. But tonight, the loft could wait. Tonight was for the fire, and the chair, and the gentle slide towards sleep that required no movement, no effort, only surrender. The tea in the cup grew cooler, forgotten for long stretches as the keeper's attention drifted between the fire and some internal landscape of memory. Perhaps thoughts turned to other winters, other fires, other evenings spent in companionship or solitude. Perhaps they wandered to the forest outside, to the creatures who sheltered in burrows and dens, waiting for spring's return. Or perhaps they simply floated, unmoored from past or future, existing purely in this present moment of warmth and safety. The book beside the teacup lay unopened, its stories unnecessary tonight. The fire provided all the narrative needed, its flames telling tales as old as time itself, stories of light pushing back darkness, of warmth defying cold, of small havens of comfort in a vast and often harsh world. The keeper watched these stories unfold, eyelids growing heavier, breaths growing deeper and more regular. Outside, a fox passed through the clearing, its red coat barely visible against the snow and the dim light from the windows. It paused, lifting its nose to test the air, catching the scent of wood smoke, and perhaps something else, some essence of human habitation that spoke of safety rather than danger. The fox regarded the cottage for a long moment, then continued on its way, leaving a delicate trail of prints that would be filled by morning. The night deepened, the stars above the forest growing brighter as the sky cleared between snow showers. Through the cottage window, if one looked up, one might see their distant, glittering coal fires burning in the infinite void, so different from the warm, close fire that heated the small room. The keeper did not look up to see them. The keeper's gaze was fixed on the hearth, where the flames continued their eternal dance, where the logs continued their steady transformation from wood to ash, from matter to heat and light. Morning. Time passed, measured by the clock's patient ticking, by the gradual settling of logs in the fire, by the deepening of shadows in the cottage's corners. The keeper's breathing grew slower still, the chest rising and falling with the rhythm of one slipping deeper into rest. The hands on the chair's arms relaxed completely, the fingers uncurling, releasing their hold on wakefulness. The fire, as if sensing its role as guardian of this sleep, burned more steadily, its flames lower now but no less warm, its light softer but sufficient to hold back the darkness. The logs glowed red at their cores, the heat radiating outward in waves that the keeper could feel even through closed eyelids, even through the quilt's layers, a warmth that penetrated to the very bones. In the forest beyond the cottage, the snow continued to fall, each flake adding to the accumulation, building the silence deeper, making the world outside even more muffled, more distant, more irrelevant to this small sphere of warmth and safety. The wind moved through the pines with a sound like breathing, a long, slow exhalation followed by an inhalation, the forest itself seeming to sleep and dream. The keeper's head settled more deeply into the chair's back, finding that perfect angle where neck and spine aligned, where comfort was complete. A small sound escaped, not quite a snore, more a sigh of utter contentment, the sound of a soul at peace with its place in the world. The firelight played across the keeper's face, softening the lines, making the years fall away, until what remained was simply a human being at rest, safe, warm, content. The teacup sat forgotten now, its contents cold, but it didn't matter. The book lay unopened, its stories untold this night, but they would wait, patient as the stones of the hearth. The clock ticked on, marking time that had ceased to have meaning, measuring moments that blended into one eternal now. The fire crackled softly, a log shifting as it burned through, settling into a new position with a gentle sound that might have been a whisper, or might have been simply the voice of burning wood. The flames adjusted to this new arrangement, finding fresh surfaces to consume, continuing their work with the patience of natural processes that have no concept of hurry, no understanding of urgency. Outside, the temperature continued to drop as the night aged, but inside the cottage, the warmth held steady. The fire's heat balanced perfectly against the cold seeping through the walls. The keeper, deep in sleep now, was unaware of the temperature, unaware of anything but the dreams that played behind closed eyes. Dreams perhaps of summer days, of forest walks, of friends long gone, or perhaps no dreams at all, just the darkness and peace of deep, restful sleep. The snow on the cottage roof grew thicker, adding another layer of insulation, helping to hold the warmth within. The windows, frosted at their edges where cold met warm, became canvases for ice crystals to create their intricate patterns, each one unique, each one beautiful, each one temporary. By morning they would be gone, melted by the sun's first rays, but now, in the deep night, they existed in perfect, ephemeral glory. The wind outside rose slightly, then fell again, then rose once more, a natural rhythm as old as weather itself. It carried with it the scent of snow and pine, of ice and stone, of the deep forest and the high mountains beyond. But none of these scents penetrated the cottage walls. Inside, the only scents were of wood smoke and tea, of old books and wool, of a life lived simply and well. The keeper's breathing was so slow now, so deep and regular, that it almost seemed to synchronize with the fires burning, with the clocks ticking, with the winds rising and falling. Everything in and around the cottage had found its rhythm, its place in the night's symphony. The world was in balance, in harmony, in that perfect state where nothing needs to change, where everything is exactly as it should be. The fire burned on, faithful guardian, never sleeping, never resting, feeding on the logs with the steady appetite of flame. The keeper had provided well for it, the wood basket still half full, enough to last through the night and into the morning. But the fire was content with what it had, burning neither too fast nor too slow, maintaining exactly the right amount of heat to keep the cottage comfortable. Hours passed, though to say how many would be impossible, for time in such moments becomes fluid, meaningless. The cottage existed in a bubble outside normal time, a place where only the present mattered, where past and future had no hold. The keeper slept on, deeply, peacefully, the sleep of the righteous, the sleep of one who has lived well and honorably, who has tended the garden and split the wood, who has welcomed the seasons and accepted what each one brought. The snow outside began to fall more heavily again, as if the sky had infinite supplies of flakes to share with the earth. The clearing disappeared under the steady accumulation. The well became a shapeless white mound. The path vanished entirely. The forest itself seemed to draw closer, the trees leaning in as if to protect the cottage, their branches heavy with snow bowing down in sheltering arcs. Inside, nothing changed. The fire burned, the keeper slept, the clock ticked, the shadows swayed. This was how the night would continue, unchanging, perfect, until the first gray light of dawn began to seep through the frosted windows. But that was hours away still, and those hours belonged to sleep and dreams, and the gentle crackle of the fire. The keeper's face in sleep was peaceful, all worry smoothed away, all care released. This was the face of someone who had found their place in the world, who had made peace with life's givings and takings, who had learned the wisdom of accepting what comes and letting go of what passes. The firelight continued to play across those features, painting them in shades of gold and amber, creating a portrait of perfect contentment. In the loft above, the bed lay empty, its blankets undisturbed. Tonight, they were unnecessary. Tonight, sleep had come here, by the fire, in the chair that had supported so many nights of reading and thinking and simply being. The bed could wait. There would be other nights for climbing the ladder, for burrowing under quilts, for sleeping in the traditional way. Tonight was for this, for sleeping upright, for trusting the chair and the fire and the night. The cottage creaked softly, the timbers contracting slightly in the cold, each one shifting by the tiniest fraction, settling more deeply into its place. These sounds were as familiar to the keeper as breathing, though the keeper did not hear them now, lost in sleep's embrace. They were the sounds of home, of shelter, of safety proven through countless winters. Fire, ever faithful, continued its work, consuming log after log with patient thoroughness, transforming solid wood into warmth and light, and eventually into ash that would feed next summer's garden. The ashes on the hearth grew deeper, their gray surface crossed with the red glow of coals beneath, a landscape of fire's aftermath that was beautiful in its own way. Outside, an owl called, its voice distant and haunting, the sound carrying through the frozen air with perfect clarity. The keeper did not hear this either, but somewhere deep in sleep, perhaps it registered, perhaps it wove itself into a dream, becoming part of the night's tapestry. The owl called again, then fell silent, its hunt taking it deeper into the forest. The night wore on, the earth turning with its ancient patience, bringing the cottage and its sleeping occupants slowly, inexorably, toward morning. But morning was still far off, still a promise, rather than a reality. Now, there was only the deep night, the snow falling, the fire burning, the keeper sleeping. The cottage stood like a fortress against the cold, its walls solid, its roof secure, its hearth burning bright. Inside, the keeper was safe, was warm, was at peace. Outside, the winter could rage or whisper, could howl or murmur. It made no difference. The cottage and its fire were enough, had always been enough, would always be enough. And so the night continued, and the snow fell, and the fire burned, and the keeper slept, and the world outside grew whiter and quieter and more beautiful with each passing hour. The forest wrapped itself around the cottage like a blanket, the trees standing guard, the snow covering everything in peace. Sleep deepened. The fire crackled. The night embraced all. And in the morning, when the keeper finally woke, stiff but rested, the fire would still be burning. The cottage would still be warm, and the world outside would be transformed into something magical. Every branch dressed in white, every surface softened by snow. But that was tomorrow's discovery. Tonight, there was only this. Only sleep. Only warmth. Only peace. Only home.